The Tempest, Act 2, Scene 1, lines 1 to 70. The earlier act was about the shipwreck. In this act, in the first scene, Alonso, King of Naples, has washed up on shore with Antonio, Sebastian, Gonzalo, and attendant lords. Gonzalo tells everyone that they can balance their sorrow with comfort. At least they have survived the terrible shipwreck. Antonio and Sebastian amuse themselves by teasing Gonzalo. Each one's conversation reveals us their character. Let us now listen to the text. Please follow it in your textbooks.
Act 2, Scene 1. Another part of the island. Enter Alonso, Sebastian, Antonio, Gonzalo, Adrian, Francisco, and others.
Beseech you, sir, be merry. You have cause, so have we all of joy. For our escape is much beyond our loss. Our hint of woe is common every day. Some sailor's wife, the masters of some merchant, and the merchant have just our theme of woe. But for the miracle, I mean our preservation, few in millions can speak like us. Then wisely, good sir, weigh our sorrow with our comfort.
Prithee, peace!
He receives comfort like cold porridge.
The visitor will not give him o'er so.
Look, he's winding up the watch of his wit. By and by it will strike.
Sir,
1. Tell.
when every grief is entertained that's offered, comes to the entertainer,
$1.
dolor comes to him indeed. You have spoken truer than you purposed.
You have taken it wiselier than I meant you should.
Therefore, my lord,
Fie, what a spendthrift is he of his tongue!
I prithee, spare!
well, I have done. But yet,
He will be talking.
Which, of he or Adrian, for a good wager, first begins to crow?
The old cock.
The cockerel.
Done. The wager?
A laughter.
A match.
Though this island seemed to be desert,
Ha ha ha! So you're paid.
uninhabitable and almost inaccessible,
Yet?
yet
He could not missed.
it must needs be of subtle, tender, and delicate temperance.
Temperance was a delicate wench.
Aye, and a subtle, as he most learnedly delivered,
The air breathes upon us here most sweetly.
as if it had lungs, and rotten ones.
Or as 'twere perfumed by a fen.
here is everything advantageous to life.
True, save means to live.
Of that there's none or little.
How lush and lusty the grass looks, how green!
The ground, indeed, is tawny.
With an eye of green in it.
He misses not much.
No, he doth but mistake the truth totally.
But the rarity of it is, which is indeed almost beyond credit,
As many vouched rarities are.
that our garments, being, as they were, drenched in the sea, hold, notwithstanding their freshness and glosses, being rather new-dyed than stained with salt water.
If but one of his pockets could speak, would it not say he lies?
Aye, you're very falsely puckered up his report.
Methinks our garments are now as fresh as when we put them on first in Afric, at the marriage of the king's fair daughter Claribel to the king of Tunis.
'Twas a sweet marriage, and we prosper well in our return.
Scene 1 takes place on another part of island. Enter Alonso, Sebastian, Antonio, Gonzalo, Adrian, Francisco, and others. And conversation is begun by Gonzalo. Remember, King is very sad. He thinks his son is lost. He is dead. And therefore, Gonzalo, in order to comfort the king, speaks in these words. Beseech you, sir, be merry. You have cause. So have we all of joy, for our escape is much beyond our loss. He says, please be merry, because we have escaped a great disaster. Our hint of woe is common. Every day some sailor's wife, the masters of some merchant, and the merchant have just our theme of woe. He says, this is common for the common folk. Sailor's wife, the master of some merchant, or merchant himself, has this kind of trouble every day. But for the miracle, I mean our preservation, few in millions can speak like us. Then wisely, good sir, weigh our sorrow with our comfort. He says, this is a great miracle because we have been preserved. Only a few in millions can speak like us. So let us count our blessings than our sorrow. Alonso, prithee, peace. Alonso is tired and he says, please, peace, have peace, don't talk like that. And Sebastian and Antonio are mocking the king and Gonzalo. So he says, he receives comfort like cold porridge. He says, king cannot receive comfort well. He receives it like cold porridge. And Antonio, the visitor will not give him over so. He says, visitor will not give up so fast. And Sebastian, look, is winding up the watch of his wit. By and by, it will strike. He says, look, he is trying to come up with some new idea of how to help Alonso, winding his brain up like some kind of clock. Soon it will strike. And as soon as he says that, Gonzalo starts again, sir. And Sebastian is very happy. He says, one, tell, look, the clock has struck. And Gonzalo, when every grief is entertained that's offered comes to the entertainer. He says, if we allow ourselves to think about or entertain every sad thing that happens, then the entertainer will end up with, Sebastian interrupts and he says, $1. Now they are betting, okay, they are betting. So, $1. Now, dollar is played pun upon. Dollar is distress. Dollar comes to him, indeed. You have spoken truer than you purposed. He says, yes, distress, though you did not mean to, you have said the truth. And Sebastian says, you have taken it wiselier than I meant you should. You took what I said more seriously than I meant it. He meant money, but Gonzalo says distress. Therefore, my lord, Gonzalo said, therefore, my lord, and Antonio is getting irritated. Fie, what a spendthrift he is of his tongue. Says, goodness, he just talks and talks and talks. Spendthrift of his tongue. He can't stop spending his tongue. Alonso says, I pray thee, spare. He's tired. He says, please spare me. But Gonzalo goes on and says, well, I have done, but yet, he says, well, I'm basically finished, but still. And Sebastian says he will be talking. Nobody can stop him. Antonio, which of he or Adrian? Now Adrian is another person who's very talkative. So they are betting between these two fellows. Who will start first? He, Gonzalo, or Adrian? For a good wager, let's bet. First begins to crow. Okay, let's begin a wager for whoever first begins to talk. Crow is talk. Here's a good bet. Which of the two, Gonzalo or Adrian? Sebastian says, the old cock, means the old rooster, that is Gonzalo. Antonio bets on the cockeriel, means young rooster. Sebastian, done. The wager. You're on. What does the winner get? What does the winner get? Antonio says, a laughter. Sebastian says, a match. It's a deal, he says. And fair enough, Antonio is the one who starts. Though this island seems to be a desert, he says, though this island seems deserted. Ha ha ha, you're paid, Sebastian says to Antonio. Yes, you have won, Antonio. Adrian has started this. Okay, and Adrian continues, uninhabitable and almost inaccessible. And Sebastian preempts a word, and yet. And Adrian, fair enough, he starts with that very same word. He says, yet. Antonio, he couldn't miss it. He says, it must need be of subtle, tender, and delicate temperance. He says it seems to be mild and gentle and have a temperate climate. This is Adrian continuing a sentence about the island. And Antonio butts in and he says, Temperance was a delicate wench. Temperance was quite a fascinating girl. And Sebastian, aye, and a subtle, and as he most learnedly delivered. Yes, and as Adrian described so smartly, she was a subtle one in bed too. Adrian goes on and he says, the air breathes upon us here most sweetly. He says, the air is so sweet here. Sebastian, as if it had lungs and rotten ones. He says, yeah, anything Adrian and Gonzalo are saying are ridiculed by Antonio and Sebastian. Okay, and as if it had lungs and rotten ones. Antonio goes on and says, or as it were perfumed by a fen. Fen is a swamp. Yeah, it smells nice, sweet as a swamp. That means terrible smell. And Gonzalo here butts in and he says, here is everything advantageous to life. And Antonio says, true, save means to live. Yes, everything advantageous to life except the means to live. And Sebastian adds and he says, of that there is none or little. He says there is to live, here there is nothing or very little. And Gonzalo, how lush and lusty the grass looks, how green. He says he's admiring, he being optimistic, admires the island. And Antonio, the ground indeed is tawny. Tawny is brown. He says ground is very brown. There's no life in it. Okay, it's barren. Sebastian says, with an eye of green in it. This is with a tinge of green in it. You can't call it green, but it is tinge of green that is displayed on the ground. So Antonio, he misses not much. Okay, he notices everything. No, he doth but mistake the truth totally. Sebastian says, yeah, no. He just misses the actual truth entirely, he says. And Gonzalo, but the rarity of it is, which is indeed almost beyond credit. He says, but the unbelievable thing is that this is really almost hard to imagine. And Sebastian, as many vouched rarities are, he says, as by definition most unbelievable things are. Yeah, what's the big deal about something that is unbelievable? That is the definition of unbelievable things. So Gonzalo is talking about his garments. He says that our garments, being as they were drenched in the sea, hold notwithstanding their freshness and glosses, being rather new dyed than stained with salt water. He says that's an amazing thing. He notices something strange. He says that our clothes, which were drenched in seawater, continue to be fresh and clean, and in fact seem almost new rather than stained by the salt water. That's what Gonzalo finds strange in all this. Although they were tossed and torn, but their garments remain as fresh as they were put on for the first time. Antonio, if but one of his pockets could speak, would it not say he lies? He says, if his pockets would speak, would they not say that he lies now? About the garments? And Sebastian, aye, or very falsely pocket up his report. He says, yes, or just try to hide and suppress the lie. They might either reveal that he was lying, or they just would hide that he is lying. Methinks our garments are now as fresh as when we put them on first in Afrique, at the marriage of the king's fair daughter Claribel, to the king of Tunis. He says, I think our clothes are as fresh as when they were put on first in Africa. Africa is Africa. At the marriage of the king's fair daughter Claribel. She says, they are as fresh as when we put them on first for Claribel's wedding to the king of Tunis. And Sebastian says, "'Twas a sweet marriage and we prosper well in our return." He says, yeah, it was a sweet marriage, but look how well we prosper on our return. To summarize, conversations reveal that Gonzalo is optimistic, Alonso is despairing, Sebastian and Antonio are flippant and devious, especially in their comments. Thank you.